Your dog knows you're coming home before you get there. Not because it heard your car, not because it recognized your footsteps. Studies have shown that dogs begin anticipating their owner's return at the precise moment the owner decides to come home, even when the owner is miles away, traveling by different routes at completely unpredictable times. We don't fully understand how. But here is the question nobody thinks to ask. What does your dog think you are? Not whether it loves you, not whether it's loyal, but what category of thing does its brain place you in? When it looks at you, this large, slow, nearly furless creature that cannot smell a tenth of what it can smell, cannot hear half of what it can hear, moves clumsily through a world it barely perceives, what is it actually seeing? The answer is stranger than you'd expect, and it says more about the nature of animal minds than almost any other question science has tried to answer.
Let's start with the animal that has lived closest to us for the longest time. Dogs have been with humans for somewhere between 15,000 and 40,000 years. That is not cohabitation. That is coevolution. Dogs did not simply learn to tolerate humans. Over tens of thousands of generations, their brains physically changed to process human social signals in ways no other animal's brain does.
In 2015, researchers at the University of Helsinki ran a study tracking where dogs directed their gaze when shown images of human faces, dog faces, and objects. The dogs showed a clear preference for human faces over dog faces. They spent more time looking at human eyes than at any other feature. And critically, they showed the same gaze patterns that human infants show when looking at adult faces. Dogs are not looking at you the way they look at other dogs. They are looking at you the way a child looks at a parent.
Neurologist Gregory Burns at Emory University spent years training dogs to lie still inside MRI machines, awake, unrestrained, completely voluntary, so he could scan their brains while they processed different stimuli. When he presented dogs with the scent of their owners versus the scent of familiar and unfamiliar dogs and humans, the owner's scent alone activated the caudate nucleus, a region of the brain associated with positive anticipation, reward, and emotional attachment. Not food, not play, the smell of you. Your dog's brain responds to your existence the way a human brain responds to something it loves. But love is not the same as understanding, and what Burns found next complicated the picture significantly. Dogs do not categorize humans as a separate species. Not exactly. The working model their brain appears to use is something closer to a superdog, a strange, large, socially dominant member of their own pack, one with incomprehensible abilities, unpredictable behaviors, and near total control over resources, but a pack member nonetheless. When your dog rolls onto its back, it is not performing submission to a human. It is performing submission to a dominant social animal using the only behavioral vocabulary it has. When it brings you a dead bird, it is not making a gift. It is participating in a pack behavior, contributing to the group's resources the way a lower-ranking wolf contributes to a hunt. It is slotting you into the closest category its brain can construct. And the closest category is pack. Now, consider an animal whose perception of you is almost entirely smell. Rats have been studied in laboratories for over a century. We know more about rat cognition than almost any other non-human animal. And what we know is deeply uncomfortable for anyone who assumed they were simply test subjects. In 2011, Neuroscientist Inbal Ben-Ami Bartel at the University of Chicago placed rats in a situation with a genuinely surprising outcome. One rat was placed in an open arena. A second rat was trapped inside a small restraining tube in the center. The free rat could see and hear the trapped rat. It could also smell its distress. Within days, the free rats learned to open the restraining tube and release the trapped rat. They did this repeatedly. They did it even when it required effort. And in the most significant variation of the experiment, they did it even when the reward for opening the tube was chocolate, one of the most motivating substances in a rat's environment. The free rats would open the trap, release their companion, and then share the chocolate. They chose another rat's freedom over their own immediate pleasure. Bartal called it empathy-driven pro-social behavior. The rats were not responding to a trained cue. They were responding to another rat's distress with something that looked, neurologically and behaviorally, like concern. Now, here is what this means for your question. When a rat in a laboratory looks at a human researcher, it is not seeing a neutral presence. It is reading a complex emotional signal. Rats can distinguish between individual humans by smell alone. They recognize specific researchers who have handled them gently versus roughly. Their stress hormone levels, measurable, objective, change based on who enters the room. They are not indifferent to you. They are forming an ongoing social assessment of you as a specific individual with a specific emotional history. The category they place you in is not predator. Not exactly. It is something more nuanced. Something like large, unpredictable social agent whose intentions must be continuously monitored. Crows are a different problem entirely. In 2008, researcher John Marsliff at the University of Washington conducted an experiment that has since become one of the most cited studies in animal cognition. His team captured crows on campus while wearing specific rubber masks, caveman masks to be precise. The crows were banded, measured, released unharmed. Standard field research procedure. What happened next was not standard. For years afterward, those specific crows and their offspring who had never been captured would dive bomb, scold, and mob any person wearing those same caveman masks anywhere on campus. They recognized the masks as the face of a threat. They remembered. They taught their children. Marsliff then tested whether the crows recognized individual human faces without masks. They did. Crows can distinguish individual human faces with accuracy that rivals human facial recognition. They track specific people across time, across location, across years. But what is more striking is what the crows appear to be doing with that information. They are not simply reacting. They are building a social model. They are constructing a representation of specific humans as individuals with histories, intentions, and threat levels. They are doing for humans what humans do for each other. Ethologist Konrad Lorenz, who spent decades studying animal behavior, argued that crows possess what he called a theory of mind rudiment, a partial ability to model what another individual knows, wants, or intends. Not fully, not the way humans do, but enough to explain why a crow will hide food only when no other crow is watching, and will move the food if it suspects it was observed. They know that other minds exist. They know those minds can have information they don't want shared. When a crow looks at you, it is not seeing an obstacle or a resource. It is seeing an agent, a mind, something that knows things, wants things, and can be reasoned about. And then there are the animals whose perception of us may be the most alien of all. Octopuses have been studied intensively for the last 2 decades, and almost everything researchers have found has violated prior assumptions. They have 9 brains, 1 central and 1 in each arm. 2/3 of their neurons are not in their central brain at all. Their arms can taste, feel, and make local decisions without consulting the central nervous system. They have no evolutionary history with humans, no coevolution, no shared social context. They are more closely related to a clam than to any vertebrate. And yet,
researchers at the Seattle Aquarium documented a case in which a single octopus consistently squirted water at one specific staff member, and only that staff member, every time she passed the tank. The octopus showed no such behavior toward any other person. When that staff member left the aquarium, the behavior stopped. The octopus had formed a specific negative association with a specific individual human and was expressing it through targeted, repeated behavior. Jennifer Mather at the University of Lethbridge, one of the world's leading octopus researchers, has documented what she describes as individual personalities in octopuses, consistent behavioral tendencies that persist across time and context. Some are bold, some are cautious, some are, by any reasonable behavioral measure, playful.
when an octopus looks at you through eyes that evolved completely independently from vertebrate eyes, that arrived at the same design through a completely separate path, it is almost certainly forming some kind of assessment. What category that assessment falls into, we genuinely do not know. We may not have the conceptual vocabulary to understand it yet. So what do animals think about us? The honest answer is that it depends entirely on the animal, and on you specifically. Your dog thinks you are family. Your rat thinks you are a large, unpredictable social presence whose emotional state is worth monitoring. Your crow thinks you are an individual with a history and a threat level that has been documented and shared. Your octopus thinks something we may never fully translate. But here is what cuts across all of them. None of them see you the way you see yourself. You walk through the world carrying a self-concept built from language, memory, culture, and continuous internal narration. You have a name, a history, a set of beliefs about who you are and why you do what you do.
To your dog, you are a smell and a social role. To your rat, you are an emotional signature.
To your crow, you are a face attached to a pattern of behavior. To your octopus, you are something we don't have a word for yet. Every one of them is reading a version of you that you will never have direct access to. And somewhere in that gap, between the self you narrate and the creature they perceive, is something closer to what you actually are. Not the story you tell about yourself, just the pattern you leave behind.